can your employer force you to get a flu shot or lose your job? A major Michigan healthcare group thinks that they can do that. They're giving their employees an ultimatum. They say get the flu shot by December 31st or get fired. They say individual rights must be sacrificed to make sure that their patients' health is not threatened by the flu, and it raises a lot of interesting questions. Joey Jackson joins me now. He's a defense attorney, and Chip Merlin is a trial attorney. Gentlemen, welcome. Good to have both of you here.
Thank you.
So basically they're saying we're a medical facility. We have a lot of people here who have compromised health conditions. If you choose to work here, you're going to have to get a flu shot because we simply can't risk you passing that on to vulnerable patients. Joey, what do you think?
I think not at all. It's coming back. Listen, here's the point. There's a balancing test that's done, Martha, and here's the balancing test. You have individual rights to privacy, and that's inherent in the 14th Amendment, and you have to balance that against the employer's right to have patients who may or may not get sick. The problem I have here is that it's an over-inclusive regulation. They're doing this, and it was voluntarily done initially, and they had 65% compliance. There has been no showing that not having that 65% compliance or having a higher compliance would have any effect on patients whatsoever. Now, there are federal statutes and regulations, I'm sure Chip will address them, that address the issue of whether an employer can do this, but I think on balance and as a whole, they're overreaching, overstepping, and as a result of that, they are impinging on the individual freedoms of their workers.
All right, well, our own Dr. Manny says 65% compliance is not enough. He said when you do this kind of thing voluntarily, you don't have enough people participating. Chip, what do you think?
Well, it might come as a surprise to most people, but private employers can place conditions with respect to employment, and so long as it doesn't violate such things as race, color, creed, national origin, sometimes sexual preference in some states, it can be legal to require conditions of employment such as flu vaccines. We already do it in schools. We require all children to have vaccines unless there's some type of labor agreement like the baseball players union used to have. We now have baseball players that are getting drug tested all the time. So we shouldn't find this as being too overboard to have employers require people to take vaccines. This came up a couple years ago when the swine flu epidemic was a big concern. Many employers didn't make it mandatory. They just suggested strongly that people do it. But if an employer requires somebody to do it, there's nothing unless it's against your religion or against some type of medical disability, like you're allergic to the vaccine, that legally you can stop it from happening.
And they're saying that they would make exemptions in this case for that. And you made the salient point here in my mind, and that is that this is a private company, Joey. Well, and you know what? If you don't want to work there, you don't have to work there. Nobody's forcing these people to work in this institution. They're saying, if you work here, though, this is part of our deal.
It's a private company, Martha, but guess what? They're chartered by the state, and as a result of that, there are regulations that still are applicable to them. And simply because it's private doesn't mean you leave your rights at the door. Ultimately, suggesting that this would be analogous to, for example, children getting vaccination shots, it's far different. Number one, children are very vulnerable. They're a very vulnerable part of our society. Number two,
so are these patients that they're trying to protect, though, Joey.
But that gets to my number 2 point, Martha, and that is that there's a significant cause and effect relationship. We know with vaccinations in schools and children what a disaster it can cause. There has been no showing on the equivalent of that with this employer, and as a result of that, I just think they are overreaching here, and I think the validity of the lawsuit will be recognized.
I understand your point. Chip, before we go, does the fact that it is a state charter, does that trump the private company's rights as a private entity?
No, it's a private employer. All corporations are chartered by states, so that won't fly legally. The truth of the matter is, in almost all the states of the union, a private employer can make conditions so long as they're not illegal, and that comes down to race, color, religion, and national origin, sometimes sexual preference. If you don't discriminate on those, a private employer can place these types of restrictions and conditions upon employment, and we can probably expect that they're going to come up more often.
Well, you know, there's been a lot of backlash about vaccines all across the country over the last several years, and that's prompting some of this discussion. They had about 50 people who work at this facility who showed up for a group against vaccines meeting the other night. So this is a hot issue. We're going to leave it there, guys. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon. Joey, thank you. Keep that thought. We'll catch you later. Chip, thank you very much. Dr. Manny is going to weigh in on this. He wrote a piece on this, on the impacts of getting the flu shot. Read his full article at foxnews.com. Click on the health tab at the top of the site, and you will see Dr. Manny's notes there. Click on Get Vaccinated or Be Terminated, and you can get his take on that controversy.